It's football and other F words. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on X at FWordSpot. He's Mike Herndon, who's enjoying probably what is it? How cold is it over there? Like 40 something degrees or
It's
something?
20 degrees
20.
this
Well, it
morning.
was
It's
negative
getting up to
8
40
this
today.
morning. It got up to -8 this, or down to -8 this morning
Good
in my
Lord.
area. It was insane. We're going out of town, but the dogs were overdue for a grooming appointment. So I trekked out to the snow to Petco this morning. It got down to -8. I guess at one point while I was driving, which is insane. It's in the office. It's a little cold because we have the fireplace running. The fireplace is right next to the thermostat. So cold everywhere else in the house downstairs. So that's why I got the hoodie on, the Bucky's sock hat, if you will, on, or toboggan,
Nice.
depending on your regional usage of the word. But podkarski.com is where you can find your written stuff. You got it. What do you got in the books for today? Anything?
So today coming up, it's not live just yet, but it will be. I did 6 lessons that you can take away, one from each wild card game. I didn't want to. I
So
honestly
did
didn't want to
Trey.
write.
That's Trey's article today too at
Oh, is it really?
stackingthebox.com. Yeah.
That's funny.
Because nobody's
So,
been talking about it on the radio. So I was like, oh, this would be a good one to do. Because we were going to talk about it on Monday on the football show, and we didn't get around to it. But lessons learned from the wild card teams.
and I think there's a lot to be learned from those games because they're all very different, and I think they all bring their kind of unique lessons to the table. But yeah, I didn't want to beat the coaching search drum any more than I already did last week because I already gave
Yeah.
my thoughts on the coaching search, which we'll get into a little bit more here. And I knew we'd be talking about that today here too, so I didn't want to just write my article and then talk about the whole thing on here too. So you
Well,
get a
my
little bit
thing
something
is that
different there.
everybody is continuing to still rank the coach openings. We are now like 2 or 3 weeks into the coaching search, and there's still, like yesterday, all on the radio. I think almost every radio station yesterday, one of the topics was ranking the coaching openings. Like, did they all get together and decide that we are going to do the same boring ass content during this coaching search?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good framework for discussion, I guess. But to me, I think all that is a waste of time because, frankly,
Mm.
it's going to be in the eye of the beholder, right? Like some coaches are probably going to be like, "Yeah, I'd rather live in Nashville than L.A." Some are going to be like, "Give me L.A." So some are going to view like Amy Adams Strunk differently than other coaches might. And roster composition, all that stuff. Like there's beauty in the eye of the beholder, I think, very much
Yeah.
in the
And
coaching.
everybody's writing the same description I've seen, except for over at stackingtheinbox.com, where you should go for all of your coaching information. I mean, we're except for Mike Kafka, I've broached over 3,000 words on all the and most of the time 4,000 words on all the coaching candidates, except for Nosferatu himself, Mike Kafka. We are going to do the generic thing of just talking about our general head coaching rankings, but if you want our real thoughts on the head coaches, the in-depth information on like staffs they can bring and all that, go to stackingtheinbox.com. And instead, we're going to be talking about some hiring philosophies for the good chunk of this show. It's going to be a shorter show as well today, but it will be a good chunk is spent on just the philosophies and the narratives that are out there surrounding just the hiring process in general. So make sure you are over, if you're listening anywhere other than YouTube, head over to the 440 Sports YouTube page, hit subscribe, turn on notifications so you can always join the discussion. And of course, YouTube is where you can actually join the discussion by sending in your comments and all that kind of stuff. You can on Facebook, but YouTube's better. As well, you need to just keep in mind that bluegrass beverages, you may be feeling like you need to get out of the house, you're a little stir crazy and your liquor supplies are dwindling. The roads to bluegrass beverages are pretty clear. So there's a couple of icy spots, but other than that, bluegrass beverages, Hendersonville, Tennessee, go get your supplies for this winter storm. And there's another storm coming on Thursday. So today is probably the day to get everything that you need for the next little wave of snow coming in on Thursday here in Nashville, Tennessee. Bluegrass Beverages, Hendersonville, Tennessee. All right, Mike, just real quick. Like if you want to do tiers, you can do tiers. If you just want to do a straight up ranking, whatever floats your boat. Give the people your top 10 in order.
Top 10. Okay, so I will say I'll give it in tiers. Okay, so tier one to me, and this is in order for this tier at least. Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan, Bobby Slowick. Those are my top three. I think they're kind of separated from the bunch to me. They're all offensive coaches. Obviously Callahan does not have the play calling experience, but he does have a long, long
Well,
history.
there's some discrepancy with that. Like
Yeah.
Zach Taylor says he does do some play calling. I think it's all red zone play calling, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of what I'm piecing together. Then there's people that follow the team that says he does do some play calling. So it's kind of like he does and he doesn't.
It sounds like it's kind of a collaborative process between him and Zach Taylor to me. Like that
Yeah.
that is and so yeah, he's not been a pure this is the voice of the offense play caller like Ben Johnson has, like Bobby Slowick has. But Bobby Slowick has only done it for 1 year. So like I don't know how much value that has versus Callahan, although Slowick did it really well. So like that goes in his favor. But those are my top three. All offensive coaches. I think that's the direction that they need to go. That's my strong preference, anyways. But I guess dropping down into the next tier of like, I'll call this, you know, if you don't go offense, I like Mike McDonald. I think Mike McDonald is a extremely bright coach. I think he's going to be a good head coach. I think he would bring a different look. I think he's an analytical type of guy. I don't think he's this. I know people think all defensive coaches are like the meathead. Old school, like whatever. I don't think he's that. I think he's very innovative. I think he's new, like, cutting edge kind of defensive mind. If you're going to go defense, go Mike McDonald. So he's kind of in a tier on his own as my top defensive choice. After that, I really get into like, I could be talked into. And I will give those Thomas Brown and Aaron Glenn. I think those are my next two. I could be talked into those guys. We can talk about them a little bit more in depth individually. But
Stackingtheinbox.com has over 4,700 words on Aaron Glenn tomorrow. It was easily the most fun I've had researching a candidate. The stories that date back to the Bill Parcells era of football and their relationship was just so fucking fascinating. Did you know that Bill Parcells wrestled a bear?
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Just saying. I can wrestle a bear.
How big of a bear?
I don't know. Well, I haven't done that part of the research. I was too deep in the Aaron Glenn stuff, and then listening to Milk Toast Bobby Slowick, who has like the lowest energy of any of these candidates ever.
That is my biggest drawback with Slowick is like he does not have head coach energy, right? Like
Right.
he has the like
He has the energy level of a
like,
dead sloth, is how I put it. It is like if you imagine the most boring person you ever met. And then imagine someone more boring than them. That is Bobby Slowick. That's really a hindrance for me with the Bobby Slowick stuff. But we'll get to my ranking.
And he did used to work for PFF. He does feel like a PFF like analyst, just like if you just threw them all in the public eye. That's kind of how I view like what that position would look like. But anyways,
he's that Timo Risky guy, just coaching.
Yes, exactly.
Is that his name
exactly.
Timo Risky or whatever?
And who's the other one? Anyways, y'all know the PFF people we're talking about. But after
By
that,
the way, JJ Watt destroyed PFF, and it was amazing. That's the best thing that JJ Watt's ever said.
He's finally, I'm almost kind of liking JJ Watt in retirement a little bit.
I like Tom Brady. Like after he left the Patriots, everybody started kind of liking Tom Brady.
I know. Well, I actually kind of came around to Tom Brady before he left New England, but yeah, it is as they move away from like dominating your favorite team, it become more easy to root for. And then I guess after that tier, the Thomas Brown, Aaron Glenn, like I could be talked into a tier. I have the tier of guys that like I just don't really want them. I don't want Dan Quinn. I don't really want Brian Johnson, and I know like the Philly thing isn't his fault necessarily, but he's a part of that, and there's been a huge drop off on that coaching staff.
And today, by the way, on Wednesday is the meeting with Sirianni and the rest of the staff, and like or the rest of the Howie Roseman, Jeff Lurie. And this was when Doug Peterson got fired. So it'll be interesting to see if Nick Sirianni gets fired after
That
today.
will
If
be
he's
very,
if
very
he's not
interesting.
announced as fired today, he's the head coach in 2024.
Yeah. And then the other two that are in my don't really want you category would be Mike Kafka and Antonio Pierce. I'm just not a huge fan of either one. Like to me, Pierce is like Vrabel 2.0. I don't want to go back down that road again.
Except the players like him more. Just throwing it out there.
No, come on, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, how many articles were written about Mike Vrabel and his like connection to players, and Kenny Vaccaro talking about how he's different than like any coach he's ever had before, and all
It's
the
it's it's interesting that they have to be asked to go on record, whereas the
oh
people for the Raiders don't.
come
There's a
on.
difference between
There well,
being loved and
there was
liked.
never
There's
a
a difference
camp.
between being loved and liked,
There
Mike.
was never a situation where Vrabel
Like
was
your
in a
mom
spot.
loves Dom, your child. She likes you. Like she
Well,
tolerates.
okay, that's fine. But look, Antonio Pierce, the reason they're coming out for Antonio Pierce is because there's a decision to be made. None of the Titans players even thought there was a decision to be made on Vrabel. That's why there wasn't a campaign to save Vrabel's job or whatever. Like even
Shows how much
Henry
they were paying attention.
and Simmons were just like, we didn't even know that was on the table. So I think if there had
I guess
been
they
a
weren't there
situation,
for all the losing. I guess I don't know. I don't know what
well,
they were
well,
there
maybe
for.
they're naive to the way that works, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think if there had been, there would have been a big Titans contingent of players that would have come out and been, keep Mike Vrabel, all this stuff. I think he was loved in
Hey,
that
I
building.
agree with you.
I
Nick
think,
Westbrook-Ikine and Mason Kinsey and Jack Gibby, they would have been like lining up at St. Thomas Sports Park like the Proud Boys trying to get in and make sure that he's not. They would have had a January 6th riot trying to keep Mike Vrabel if they knew that there was a chance he's even fired because their only reason he's in the league, they're in the
I
league
think,
is because
look,
of Mike Vrabel.
Ben Jones loved Mike Vrabel, Taylor Lewan loved Mike Vrabel, Derrick Henry loved Mike Vrabel,
It
Jeff
took a while for
Simmons loved
I
Mike
think Mike
Vrabel.
Vrabel and Taylor wanted to get there.
I mean, I think almost every player who's come through the doors, like there's exceptions, sure. Like if you want to talk about the malcontents like Tier Tard and Jamel, whatever, Jaleel Johnson, um, and all these losers, Monty Rice that have come in and washed out. Like,
All the
yeah,
losers that got cut, but there's
yes,
still a lot of losers that are still employed because of Mike Vrabel. And I agree. They
yeah.
would have came out and supported him, like I
He's
said.
selective with the losers that he likes, but I will say, like by and large, that locker room loved Mike Vrabel. So I don't think it's
Like
fair to
Mike
say
Vrabel.
that like Antonio Pierce has some like huge step up on Vrabel as far as player relationships. I just don't. I think
He
that's a narrative.
I don't see anybody asking for a trade now that Mike Vrabel's gone.
I don't. I think Max Crosby's bluffing. By the way, I don't believe for a second that he's gonna like actually demand to leave if Antonio Pierce doesn't get the
Well,
job. I think that's
Antonio
the.
Pierce is getting hired anyway, so
I
I
think
think
that's
they're
the
actually doing the
tool
right
he
thing.
can use right now to put any pressure on the organization, which clearly they want Pierce, and I'm glad for that. I think he
And
should stay there.
I think the general consensus is in Raiders Nation is that he's getting hired.
Yeah,
So I'm with it. So like to me, it's like Antonio Pierce and Ben Johnson aren't even realistic options for the Tennessee Titans. So I kind of throw them to the side. I have them ranked, but I kind of throw them to the side because Ben Johnson's going to the Commanders. I mean, let's just call it like it is. He's going to the Commanders.
seems likely.
Um, yeah. And so I don't think Ben Johnson, he hasn't even scheduled an interview here yet. He has scheduled an interview elsewhere already with the Panthers and the Commanders. And I think he already did one with the Chargers, and he has not done one here. So I'm kind of feeling like the writing's on the wall. Ben Johnson ain't a real candidate. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a requested candidate, but he ain't coming. So I
yeah. I
got
think the
Brian.
Titans want him. I think he doesn't want the Titans.
Yeah. I got one tier, which is these guys I think would be home run hires. And that's Brian Callahan and Mike McDonald. And I have Mike McDonald pretty high. Of course, this is excluding Ben Johnson, but if Ben Johnson suddenly was a viable actual candidate, I would put Ben Johnson in this tier and he would be above Mike McDonald. But I think those are the two guys that you're getting the most creative, the most experienced in different ways to be. I think they fit the vision, right? If the vision is innovative, evolved, sustained success, aligned and collaborative, and a premier NFL franchise, the Super Bowl champions, and that is the vision that they have said. I think those two fit the bill the most. And then I have the next tier, and it's kind of like almost a standalone tier for me. It's like people have no clue just how good this guy is, and that's what StackingInbox.com is for. And I think that's Aaron Glenn. And he is not only the number one defensive coordinator voted on by the players, but he's the number one coordinator out of all positions as the most highest graded by his players. And so I think that Aaron Glenn has a deep coaching history. He has really good mentors. Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, and Sean Payton are like four of his biggest mentors in this thing. Like Aaron Glenn is more Sean McDermott defensive head coach than Mike Vrabel defensive head coach. And then maybe you don't like Sean McDermott, and that doesn't do anything for you. But we both said that Sean McDermott is a better head coach than Mike Vrabel just a week ago. So I think he's more closer to that style where he is open to bringing in an offensive play caller and let the guy do the offense the way he wants to, letting the guy like Aaron Glenn would hire someone like a Brian Daboll or something like that. And yes, they may crank out different people and different OCs, but you're going to have at least 2 years with this next OC. No matter who is hired, you're going to have 2 years. Nobody's going to get immediately hired after this year because your roster is kind of in a terrible state, unless you guys go crazy on offense, which is probably out of the realm of possibility. It doesn't matter if you have an offensive head coach or a defensive head coach. That offensive coordinator is probably going to still be here unless he gets fired. Like, that's just how it is. Then the next tier down is like, I know he's good, I think, but I just can't get past the personality. I can't get past the energy. And I don't think players as you can beat a dead horse with players, leader of men. But I don't even think he's a leader. And I mean, and I don't, not in the locker room or anything, but there's just something about Bobby Slowick that, like, everything on paper and everything in a game is good, but everything that we don't see is what, like, I'm definitely worried about when you are watching these videos and these media availabilities and these interviews. I just don't see it. I don't see head coach energy. And I'm with you on that. Then I have Thomas Brown. And we're going to talk about box score scouting coaches, but he went into an untenable situation and was offensive coordinator that called plays for 3 games. And it was not an offense he's familiar with. Like, I understand, like, if anything you knock Thomas Brown for is taking the job. But there's only 32 offensive coordinator positions. You don't knock him from the head coaching search because he went to a bad situation that was toxic the whole way through, that started from David Tepper down to Scott Fitterer, down to Frank Reich. And he's in an offense that has no playmakers. That's not an offense that he is known to be involved with because he's with Sean McVay. You watch the history of what Sean McVay has done with him and how he begged him to join the staff. He begged him to join the staff at the Rams. Sean McVay did. Thomas Brown is legit. Thomas Brown needs to be on your radars. You guys got to understand that you cannot box score scout. When we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Then I'm with you. I think I got Antonio Pierce above everybody else, but I just don't think it's likely. Brian Johnson, Dan Quinn, Mike Kafka. And PBK saying Thomas Brown designed the offense they ransacked. No, he did not. Frank Reich did. Is Frank Reich's offense. He worked within the framework of Frank Reich. PBK, known disinformation spreader. So, I wouldn't pay much attention to him. But Brian Johnson, Tom, and Dan Quinn, Mike Kafka would be like no's for me. And Brian Johnson, through no fault of his own, I just don't think he's ready. Mike Kafka, I just don't think is good. And Dan Quinn is just Mike Vrabel. He's just Kyle Shanahan merchant Mike Vrabel with a slightly better resume, but he's not a very good coach.
He's a Micah Parsons merchant. I mean,
yeah, that too.
Congrats.
Like, I mean, I'm just good.
You have some wildly talented players in Dallas.
Yeah. And PBK says he'll tag me, even though he hid from me when I asked him to show me the rules about scheduling. So take it for what it's worth. It's probably like from the Inquirer, National Enquirer or something. So anyway, we all know what's going on in Carolina. So that brings me to talking about like these head coaching philosophies that out there. And I think there's a lot of lazy narratives being driven out there. I think that we could have a big discussion, but I think there's, first off, a lot of lazy analysis. I think people do not go in and search the full background. And listen, I'm completely open to seeing whatever the PBK is going to tag me in and reading it. But there's also, you got to read between the lines and know what's going on. One article does not tell you the whole story of a candidate. One article does not tell you the whole story of what goes on behind the scenes. And your box scores that you see, like when you see Brian Johnson's offense or Brian Johnson's offense or Thomas Brown's offense take the field, it's not necessarily has to be their offense. It's not necessarily that they're the ones calling the plays, because Nick Sirianni and apparently uh, Brian Johnson are all over the map, right? Like they're all kind of, in each other's ears talking. And that's kind of how it was with Shane Steichen and all that kind of stuff. There's just so much history when you get into these coaches that's kind of lazy. It's like, to me, it's like when people say, well, the Titans need to bring in Liam Cohen to be offensive coordinator. Outside of him coaching, have never coached, by the way, a 4,000-yard passer. But outside of him coaching Will Levis in Kentucky 1 year, what is your reasoning behind it? And nobody really gives you a reasoning. And then, some people say, well, he was the Rams offensive coordinator in, I guess 2022 or something like that, whenever it was. Well, they weren't that good in 2022, so, we'll see. But, like, he's never coached up a passer to an NFL level. And I feel like there's better versions of Liam Cohen everywhere in everybody's coaching tree. So I feel like it's just lazy analysis. That's just one example of it. What about you?
I mean, I actually do
Oh,
think.
sorry, Zedine. I said that without seeing Zedine's comment where he goes, any head coach candidates have ties to Liam Cohen. That was not an attack on you, Zedine. That was already planned in my notes to talk about that.
I don't think they have to hire Liam Cohen, but do I think it would be a good idea to bring in someone who clearly has a good relationship with Will Levis already? Because like that offensive coordinator quarterback trust thing, I think is big, and there's already built-in trust there. So like, if you did, for example, hire Thomas Brown, who coached in L.A. with Liam Cohen for many years, would it make sense for Thomas Brown to hire Liam Cohen to come in as his offensive coordinator? Absolutely. That makes perfect sense to me. Do I think it's like a job requirement that, whoever is hired hires Liam Cohen? No, I don't think it's anywhere near that level, but I do think it makes sense. Like, right. Like, and I also think, that like, you don't need to, like, you don't have to shoehorn anything in, but like one of the biggest things that I want to know is like, who can you hire as an offensive line coach in the interview process, right? So like, I'd be very interested in candidates who could bring in like a really respected offensive line coach, and whether I don't know whether Brian Callahan's dad would leave Cleveland to come coach with his son or not. But if that was on the table, that puts Brian Callahan maybe all the way to the top of my list, to be honest. Because if you could get Bill Callahan working with the offensive line, that makes a big deal. It makes a big difference to me. And obviously, he's not going to leave his son's side, so there's not even the potential of poaching if that was to come to pass. So like, and I don't know whether he would or not, but I'm just throwing that out as an example. I do think there are staff hires that would make candidates far more appealing than others, even if the uh overall resume maybe is not that much better, or maybe even a little bit worse. But I do think your point, just generally about box score scouting coaches, is probably the biggest thing to me, because like Thomas Brown is the perfect example. Everyone just looks at, oh, well, where is he coaching now? And did that side of the ball do good this season? Um, and that's just not all that goes into it, because there's so much we just talked about, the Titans roster and the deterioration of the roster. And like Mike Vrabel wasn't a good coach in 2019 and 2020 and 2011, and then suddenly a bad coach in 2022 and 2023. Like, he's been the same guy the whole time. And I think it's absurd to ignore the fact that rosters are different across the league. Some rosters are more talented than others. Ultimately, it's up to the coach to get the most out of what you do have to work with. But I mean, it's just not as simple as, well, hire the guy from the number one offense last year, and that's going to be the best coach, because we've seen coaches come from all sorts of different you know teams, backgrounds, things like that, and go on to have success. And it's not always just as clear as that. Like, and I've used this example before, but is the Vikings wide receivers coach the best wide receivers coach in the NFL, or is Justin Jefferson just fucking awesome? Like, it doesn't mean that the coach gets all the credit for that. It could just be that Justin Jefferson was always going to be awesome, no matter who his wide receivers coach was, because he's got like an S2 score that's freaking off the charts, and because he's big and talented and works hard and does all the things that he needs to do to be successful anyways, and he gets some help from his coaches along the way. But I just think it's dangerous to sit there and like 100% ascribe whatever success or lack of success a unit has to its direct coach, right? Like, it's just not as simple as that. It's giving way too much credit to coaches, to be honest, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the players, we've seen good coaches have bad players and have bad performances, right? Like, I just don't think um, you can sit there and draw that line every single time. Even though it's hard to not do that, because that requires like in-depth research into each of these guys, what people are saying about them around the league, what their players say about them, what former coaches say about them, all that stuff is what is required. And a lot of people just don't either care that much, frankly, or have the time to do all that research, which is why you read Stacking the Inbox and go get, the in-depth analysis of who these guys really are. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters, not whatever their unit did last year.
Yeah, like to me, I mean, remember if what the unit did really says something about what the head coach is, Vrabel would have never got hired as head coach. Like that I mean, and listen, Vrabel got fired, so take that with what you will. But Vrabel brought this team, took an average team, made it really good,
Yeah.
and then it got really bad. But he did that. Even now, I will say this: the Mike Vrabel situation kind of bled into what the defense looked like. I mean, the defense was never like fantastic. Didn't matter if you had Dean Pease, Jim Schwartz, Shane Bowen. Didn't matter who was back there coaching that defense. It just never was that great.
I'll
It
I'll
was
say
never good.
I'll say this though, because we just talked about rosters mattering and stuff like that. This team never had like a premier pass rusher during Vrabel's time, and I'm as big a Landry fan as there is out there, but he's not a Bosa or a Watt or any of these guys that are like the true game changing, game wrecking type pass rushers. I think you have to have an elite defense, and I still go back to what Robert Mays and Nate Tice said on the Athletic Football Podcast a couple years ago. They asked around the league. I think it was maybe last offseason or the one before that, and they always do this. They ask around, when they talk to coaches, they say, "Who are you studying? Who are you trying to pick up things from?" And they said that almost to a man, every coach they talked to around the league was saying, "We're studying the Titans. We're studying the Titans pressure packages, the things that they're able to do at that front." And how they mix things up with coverage on the back end, that they were studying what the Titans were doing. So I don't think, while the results were never like elite here with the defense, they were good for a good chunk of Vrabel's tenure here. I do think they were pretty innovative in what they were actually doing schematically. I just don't think they really had like star level players. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons and Kevin Byard were the two star level players that they ever had on this defense, and neither one of them played like one of the two premier positions in edge or corner. So like, I just don't know like how much you can expect that to translate into elite offense or elite defensive performances, even if it's being coached well and schemed well. So I do think Vrabel had some unique and interesting things that he did defensively, even if at the end of the day they weren't like the Browns or whoever you want to use as or the Ravens as a example for truly elite defensive performance.
Yeah, I agree. Um, the next thing I kind of want to talk about is like the people who say, "Oh man, I cannot believe they got rid of Mike Vrabel. He's such a great head coach." Blah blah blah, and then turn around and say, "Well, they can't hire someone that is even like sniffs the defensive coach realm. Like you can't do that. You can't do that." Even though I just said Vrabel's a good coach. Now, listen, if you're a Vrabel hater and you say they can't do it, hey, listen, I preach consistency. But at some point, some of this stuff has to start making sense when it comes out of your
Yeah.
mouth.
I don't. I
Um,
think it kind of does, though. Doesn't it make some sense that
no, that
here's my
doesn't.
take on it. Because
I
here's my
think
take
I
on it.
think people who say excluding all defensive coordinators and all no, because I had when I talked about Aaron Glenn today. So this is what I mean. So when I talked about Aaron Glenn today, and I just mentioned I think he's going to change some people's minds. People automatically say can't hire a defensive head coach because they're going to run a 1990s offense.
No, yeah, I don't think that's true. I think that is lazy and short-sighted because there are defensive head coaches around the league that have run advanced offenses before. I mean, like Bill Belichick is a defensive head coach and had literally the best offense in the history of the sport in 2007. So I don't think it's as simple as defensive head coach equals we're going to run the ball every time we can and try to make it a race to 17 every game. So I think that's short-sighted and lazy. But I do understand people who don't want to go to a defensive coach because they look at it as you just fired a defensive coach who was pretty good, who had some good results along the way. If you're going to make that big move, go in the other direction. Go get an offensive guy and try to be, one of these teams that has their Sean McVay, their Kyle Shanahan, that kind of setup where you've got consistency on that side of the ball. I completely understand that reasoning and why some people don't want to consider a defensive coach, even though they liked Vrabel and didn't want him to go. So I think there is some logic in there, but I agree that if it's based on you think all defensive coaches are going to run bad offense, that's just not accurate.
And everybody talks about the chasing of the OCs. Like I said, no matter who's coming in this year, they're staying for a minimum of 2 years. So that gives you enough chance to,
I mean,
yeah. I mean, like, come on, huh?
Matt LaFleur didn't. He was 1 year.
I
He
think
was
that
here
was a
1 year.
special situation. He didn't do anything to really earn the head coach. I just think that people were chasing the McVay person, like at that
But people are
time.
still chasing the McVay person. If they hired, say they hired Liam Cohen, and Liam Cohen comes in and puts up 35 points a game with Will
Well,
Levis.
that's different. That's an extreme case, right? You're using extreme case to support your case.
Well,
And I said at the
you can't say
earlier, I said at
minimum.
the did
Minimum.
Matt LaFleur go 35 points a game? No.
No.
I said at the beginning of this whole thing that unless the OC goes insane, it's not likely that the OC is going to go insane this year. I mean, I think we can both say that this is going to be a
Yeah.
rebuilding year. The likelihood that this offense goes and puts up 35 points a game is fucking slim. Now, listen, if they do, they deserve to have a head coaching job. But if they go from 17 to 24 points per game, and we're just throwing out numbers, we haven't researched how many points per game all these teams have gone. I don't think they're going anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
I
like,
mean,
that's kind of where I'm at. I think you got a minimum of 2 years, and for me, I think that's fine. I understand, though. I am pro Brian Callahan and Ben Johnson over everybody, but I'm not pro Bobby Slowick over everybody. So, like,
yeah.
that's kind of where the line is drawn for me. Is that like I'm pro some offensive coordinators over everybody, offensive head coaches, then I'm pro defensive head coaches over the field. So, like, to me, that's just kind of where I'm at with
Yeah.
this whole thing, and I think
And
that's how
that's
people got to remember it because this roster stinks. Now, listen, if Ren Carthon is better than what even I think he is, then this roster could be good next year. It can happen, right? I mean, we saw like the Houston Texans swapped out like four offensive linemen, then drafted a few as well. And then they got all these guys that fit the system that were wide receivers. I mean, Robert Woods, Noah Brown were both new. Tank Dell was an addition. John Mechie came back from injury. They added Dalton Schultz. I mean, they changed that entire offense, right?
yeah.
I mean, that influx of talent. The Titans don't have the resources to do that right now. So we have to be realistic that next year is going to be kind of like that. I'm not going to say it's as bad as the 2021 Lions, but Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn knew going in, and Ben Johns, or well, I guess Anthony Lynn at the time. But
Yeah.
the article I read is like Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell knew going in, we need to get the staff, and this is going to be a rebuild. And that is what you have. That's what the head coach has to understand, is that the resources are good with money, but the resources that you really need for this team to start thriving and have sustained success comes in the draft, and they don't have that this year. So like it's like you have to understand, and I think fans need to go ahead and prepare themselves. This is going to be a rebuild year. Can they be a rebuild year that goes and wins 9 games? Sure. We'll see what the roster looks like, but sure, that can happen. But can they be a rebuild year and still go 5 or 6 wins? Probably the most likely scenario, in my opinion,
Yeah.
at this point in time.
I kind of think the Packers are a good example, especially on the offensive side of the ball, anyways, of what an ideal situation would look like over the next 2 years, right? Like I think the Packers went super young, and they basically remodeled their entire offense around Jordan Love in two off seasons. You know, they went and got Christian Watson in the draft. They went and got Wicks. They went and got your boy Reed. They got Musgrave. They got Kraft. Like they got all these guys who are playing for them. Like I went and looked. Christian Watson is the oldest wide receiver or tight end who caught a pass for them in that game against Dallas on Sunday. He's
Which Dan
24
Quinn
years
just let
old.
them all catch passes, by the way.
He's 24 years old. He was the oldest guy that caught a pass for them in that game. Jordan Love is 25. Their entire offensive line, I think the only one older than 26 is Elgton Jenkins, who is older than I thought he was for some reason, but he's 28. And then Aaron Jones is the only guy that's that's older than him on the entire offensive roster. So they are they have done something remarkable in the way that they've rebuilt that offense on the fly in Green Bay, and that's what I think the Titans should be looking like. You got to get some stable offensive line pieces, obviously. But then you can go get like if you can get a Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed, like none of these guys were first round picks, right? Like all these guys that we're talking about in Green Bay, second, third, fourth, fifth. Romeo
A
Dobbs was
lot
a
of
fifth round
Senior
pick.
Bowl wide receivers and Senior Bowls coming up. Just saying.
So like it does not have to be all first round picks. Like you can find guys who can help you later in the draft, and that's what the Titans need Rand Carthon to do for them. But yeah, I do think that this could be a relatively quick rebuild. But I mean, they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender in 2024. Like go ahead and put that out of your brain that like there's going to be this miraculous season. Like if the only way that that happens is if they nail every single transaction that they have this off season, and Will Levis makes a massive leap in year 2, and it's not likely, right? Like I mean, maybe all the stars align, you never know, whatever, but it is very unlikely. I think 2025 is the year that I'm circling for. Like, all right, they've had a couple years to build this thing around Levis. Now the new head coach is going into year 2. There's some continuity. Then you can go maybe and push the pedal down. You want to see some baby steps next year, but I'm not expecting 10 wins next year.
Yeah, I think that would be it can happen, right? I mean, it can. I mean, the division is not
And
that
nobody thought the
strong.
Texans would be
Right.
in
I
the
mean, the Texans
playoffs,
were like what
winning playoff games.
the favorites for the second best favorites, odds-on favorites to have the worst record in the NFL.
Yeah,
And I think they rounded it out with I think it was Cardinals, then Texans, then
the Rams
Buccaneers and
were up
Rams,
there. Yeah,
and 3 of them are in the playoffs.
yeah, it's crazy.
So I mean, crazy things can happen.
Yeah,
This
true.
division is still prime for the picking because I don't necessarily believe in Shane Steichen. I know everybody. I had someone call Shane Steichen elite in my
Well,
mentions
I'll
earlier,
say I'll
and
say this.
there's a lot going in Philly than just saying Shane Steichen leaving. It's hard when you lose 2 coordinators. It's really hard, and when you have a dumb idiot like Nick Sirianni who does not know how to manage his own staff properly, even though that he has seen how to do it previously, because obviously Jalen Hurts needs a lot of hand holding. That I think people overinflate Shane Steichen's importance. But I am willing to give a little time before I declare Shane Steichen anything. D'Amico Ryans is right now. I mean, obviously, because their Titans don't have a head coach, is the best head coach in the AFC South, and I thought that he was the second best already last year after he got hired. So to me, it's like you're chasing the Texans at this point. Jaguars are just going to kind of middle around because they have a mediocre coach, an average NFL quarterback, and they're just going to kind of piddle around for a while.
I
And a
agree
really
with
bad
you on the
GM.
Jags. I think the Jags are have found kind of their level, honestly. Like, I just don't know that there's another gear for them to get to with this core. I think they've got to really shake some things up if they're going to find like that next level. But I think the Texans are here to stay. I think they're going to be extremely competitive for the next, 5 years, maybe 10 years. Who knows? That's a long time in NFL terms. But I'm higher on Steichen than you are because
Isn't it
this
Steichen?
Steichen, whatever. I am higher on him because I think what happened in Philly is not all him, but I think he gets some credit in the post mortem of, all right, maybe we weren't giving him enough credit last year for what Philly was
I
doing.
would have liked to have seen what he would have done this year
Yeah,
with the same mediocre quarterback that he had, but a harder schedule and a much better NFC. Like
yeah,
they did what the Jaguars did, but the Jaguars did it in the terms of the AFC South, where they thought that they were just good and they made very minimal moves. And I feel like the Eagles did the same thing, and then they bring in all these ex Titans players, like they think that they're going to be some some blessing in disguise. Like, did you even watch Tennessee Titans play? And carry them over the hump, and they didn't. And I think that falls. I think a little of this falls on Howie Roseman too. I think the Howie Roseman, and I've always said that I think the Howie Roseman um, love is way overrated
yeah.
as a GM. Um, but I feel like, to me, I would like to have seen what Steichen does in a because we saw what his offense does against really good teams in the AFC, and he had the benefit of an easy schedule in Indianapolis, had a busy benefit of an easy schedule in Philly last year. We'll
Yeah,
see
but
what happens when it gets tougher.
I know. I agree with that, but also they went from 30th in the NFL in scoring to 10th in the NFL in scoring under Steichen this year with Gardner Minshew at quarterback and basically the same supporting cast around him. I mean, and
Whoa,
Jonathan
they
Taylor
didn't get to
was
play the
out.
Tennessee Titans twice.
Well, I mean, yeah, that helps, um but yeah, I mean, I still think it's wildly impressive because they didn't have like a huge influx of talent on offense. In fact, Jonathan Taylor missed like most of the year, and they put up big time numbers on offense this year with Gardner Minshew. So, like to me, I thought that was pretty impressive, and I honestly feel like Colts and Texans are kind of set up here to be tough moving forward if Anthony Richardson hits, which I know you're an Anthony Richardson fan. We still need to see a lot
Not anymore.
more.
Now that he's injured, I'm out.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
has to
I
he has to
think that
play that Lucas Oil Stadium turf too much for me to
yeah,
believe that with the style that he plays football is going to be able to be sustainable. Now, if he
yeah, I think
changes his
he's going to
style,
miss
then maybe we'll talk.
games all the time. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out next year with him back.
Yeah, so to me, it's like when you are bringing in this guy, it's not a you want offensive-minded head coaches, number one.
Yeah,
But if these offensive-minded head coaches blow their fucking interview, right, and they don't get hired anywhere, and you land on a defensive-minded head coach, which is quite possible, right? I mean, Eric
yeah,
Bieniemy has not gotten a head coaching job because apparently he's a terrible interview. That kind of stuff happens all the time.
yeah.
People pull their name from the runnings and decide, hey, I'm just not ready. I'm going to stay here. Happens all the time. So I think that what you're looking for is someone that's innovative. And I think that a lot of these people outside of Dan Quinn, I don't know what to expect from Mike Kafka, but I'm just not ready to throw any support behind Mike Kafka. Antonio Pierce, I don't know. I think those three are kind of like, I don't think they fit the vision at this point.
I will say,
But
like
like to me,
Kafka's pedigree is kind of interesting, having spent a bunch of time with Andy Reid in KC and then going to work for Brian Daboll in New York. I like his mentors. I don't know enough about him, and I don't know that he's been doing anything long enough to really be a head coaching candidate at this point, but
Yeah.
I like his pedigree anyways.
Yeah, but his own family calls him boring. I'm
Yeah,
good. Like,
yeah,
I'm out. And we don't
yeah.
need boring. Like, because to me, Mike Vrabel was like a different kind of energy level, but he was kind of like, he didn't really give you a lot of good insight on a weekly basis. He just kind of gave you like half assed answers. And I need some, if we're going to keep doing this whole presser thing, and where everybody overreacts to pressers and all this kind of stuff, I just at least need something to really sink my teeth into, my beaver teeth, if you're watching on YouTube. But I really need an interesting guy. But like, to me, it's like,
A Mike
if
McDaniel's
Aaron Glenn
personality.
and Mike McDonald get hired,
Yeah,
I understand that people are going to be disappointed.
yeah,
But let's say, because like people are like, why aren't they interviewing Frank Smith? Well, I mean, like Frank Smith only has like one interview lined up. So maybe the NFL is telling you a little bit something about Frank Smith.
yeah,
I don't know. And maybe the entirety of the NFL is wrong. They've been wrong before. But sometimes you just got to pay attention to the other job openings to see maybe where you landed and in comparison, because that's what you're comparing them to, right? You're comparing these hires to the hires of everybody in that cycle.
yeah.
So that's what you got to look at. So like, I just encourage people that if it's Mike McDonald or Aaron Glenn, let them build a staff, because Aaron Glenn has a lot of passing game coordinators that he can pull from, that are from the Vikings, that are from the Lions, that are from Denver under Peyton.
Hmm.
I mean, he has a lineage that he can go back to that is involved with offensive minded head coaches like you want, right? Like if you want an offensive minded head coach, he still has future potential offensive minded head coaches to pull from for offensive coordinator.
And look, you could potentially get like a combination, right? Like you could get an Aaron Glenn and he hires Brian Callahan as his play calling offensive coordinator, right? Because Callahan
Mhm.
is not currently a play caller in Cincy. You could say the same for Kafka. You could say the same for who else is on
Seahawks
there?
passing game coordinator, Sanjay Law.
Yeah, there's several non-play calling
Mhm.
or there's several like potential offensive coordinator candidates that are like that Matt LaFleur hire, that
Now, if you
Vrabel
got
made.
Brian Callahan and he calls plays, he's likely leaving after year one. Like to me, that's like,
Right.
okay,
See,
that's a
that would
year,
be an
maybe
example.
worth it,
Yeah.
but that's a year one guy.
Yeah, and I think it would be it would be a risk that I'd be willing to take. But yeah, you could bring in like Thomas Brown as your offensive coordinator. Like there could be like one of these coaching candidates, Brian Johnson, if the Eagles get blown up, whatever. Um, there's certainly candidates out there that you could pair with him to make a really nice duo. Now you still have the instability problem and all that, but yeah, absolutely. Um, I think you've got to keep an open mind if they go defensive because it's not a guarantee that it's going to be a disaster, right? I mean, like again, 5 of the 8 division winners this year were defensive or like, quote unquote CEO style head coaches that weren't play callers. So, um, I don't know. I think it's worth keeping an open mind to anyways,
Okay,
even if
so
that's
yes,
not your
I forgot.
preference.
Frank Smith just got the Seahawks interview this week. The
Oh,
request
for
this
head
week.
coach over there?
Yeah,
Okay, so he's got 2 of them. And
yeah,
I
he's
think
probably
they
not
should
getting
talk to Frank Smith.
I think they should.
But
I mean, I'm all for talking to like Frank Smith, Dave Canales, and all this kind of stuff.
yeah.
Like I'm all for the more people that you interview, the better, for
And
sure.
as has
And
been.
Eldon's right. I mean, like right here, does Ben Johnson run the same system as Tim Kelly? Could he choose to keep him to run that system? Ben Johnson does run that system, but Ben Johnson's I don't think of a realistic candidate that anybody needs. I'm putting off writing about Ben Johnson and Dan Quinn because I don't think they're getting hired at the Tennessee Titans, and I don't want to write 37 to 4,700 words on, and I'm not going to write that on Dan Quinn, but on Brian Johnson or Ben Johnson because I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a possibility that like a Tim Kelly could come back or whatever. And it would make sense to keep parts of the coaching staff, not all of the
I
coaching
think
staff,
Charles
but
London, I think Charles London's almost a lock for the next staff. I think they're going to keep Charles London. To me, that
It would
matters more
make
because he has
sense.
scheme flexibility. He has Earnhardt Perkins and experience in the Shanahan system as well, Shanahan McVay system as well. You got to remember that Sean McVay and Mike McDaniel both interviewed him for their offensive coordinator positions before they went other direction. So, like, let's say you hired Thomas Brown, Aaron Glenn, Mike McDonald. I think that any of these guys, even Brian Callahan, have a good chance to keep it Charles London, and that's much better than keep it Tim Kelly. Show Tim Kelly the door.
Yeah, London can serve as the bridge to Levis for the new staff, which I do think they probably want, right? Like, I think you want to keep
And
some of that
oh, I
connection.
got you. I was saying, couldn't Glenn hire Kelly since he runs that Detroit type offense Ben Johnson runs? I think that he would go somewhere else other than Tim Kelly. I think there's other
Probably.
guys that he could pull from Detroit. There's Tanner Inkstrid, who is the Lions pass game coordinator and supposedly the heir apparent to Ben Johnson in Detroit Lions. Like right now, Lions Reddit is terrified because if you look at the Eagles, they lost 2 coordinators. If the Lions lose 2 coordinators, they'll likely take a step back from where they are right now. But they're terrified that Tanner Inkstrid will go with one of these coordinators. So then they're
Mm,
probably being stuck with like Scotty Montgomery, which may not be necessarily bad, but Scotty Montgomery could go with the other one. And then
yeah.
they're also really terrified of losing, turns out, Kelvin Shepard, a 3-year coach for the
Mm,
Lions. So, he was obviously the former linebacker in Tennessee, or not in Tennessee, but in the NFL.
yeah.
He's a 3-year coach, but they are terrified that he is going to be the defensive coordinator somewhere. So I don't know much about Kelvin Shepard, but I thought that was interesting going in on Lions Reddit, seeing what like when you go into these Reddits, that's when you really find out the juicy details. Like, do they really want someone to go? Do they really not? Are they afraid of who's going to take over? Who's the replacement? That's when you kind of find out stuff. Like, if Mike McDonald left, it was all just fuck the Tennessee Titans, stay away. You didn't give us Derrick Henry, all in Reddit. But when it was Mike Kafka, everybody's like, oh, take Mike Kafka. You can have him. See ya. Good riddance. Good riddance to Mike Kafka.
Yeah, I do think that while fans don't always know, right? Like, they have a good idea of who's
When
good
there's
and
an
who's not.
overwhelming sense,
Yeah,
like I feel like when they're all repeating like the same thing, that's
yeah,
when you know. When there's divisiveness, that's when you don't really know.
yeah. Because I do feel like, yeah, some people, there's times fans have gotten it wrong, or whatever, but um, yeah, I think mostly you can tell that there's been some reporting or something. There's something behind like that feeling generally
Mhm.
when it is overwhelmingly positive or negative towards a coach.
I think it would be quite odd, Mike, if Adam Peters and Rand Carthon have not talked and stayed in communication,
Hmm.
obviously. But I've seen a lot of people say, well, Vrabel's probably going to the Commanders. I don't think that's going to be the case. Do you think Vrabel's gonna go anywhere this year? I think the longer this is out there, and the longer we don't hear him taking any interviews or any interviews being requested, I kind of feel like Mike Vrabel's. I'm not saying that's what the NFL thinks of him, and maybe this is a forced taking a break or a forced hiatus from coaching. Maybe it's his own decision to take a hiatus from coaching. I'm kind of getting the sense that I don't think Mike Vrabel's getting a head coaching job.
Well, he hasn't been connected anywhere yet, as far as like an actual interview request or anything like
Right.
that. So
And
yeah,
that would get out there. Let's be honest. That's not one of the ones like that. You're the ones that Diana Russini tweets about, like, oh, well, you don't know of every head coaching interview that's going out. There's gonna be some. Those are like your in-house candidates, right? Like, maybe they interviewed like Tony Dews, Terrell Williams, or Tim Kelly. We just don't know about it. But
yeah,
I feel like first off, like everybody's like, oh, Vrabel will like if the Eagles fire Sirianni, Vrabel should be the odds-on favorite and he should take that job. I think Vrabel and Howie Roseman would not get along. The way that Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie are involved in the day-to-day operations on the coaching side, I don't think that's going to fly. And I don't think Jerry Jones and Mike Vrabel would get along, really, because I think Jerry Jones is a meddlesome owner. If he did, like, I don't know, like, maybe they changed their mind, but I don't feel like. And then what happens when, you have to go into the taking over a good team is one thing, but what happens when that good team starts getting disbanded and pieces start going away? What happens then?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if I think Mike Vrabel's best shot is Seattle. Like I think it's the perfect fit, and I think that it's the perfect marriage between GM and head coach that he could ask for. I think Seattle is his best fit, bar none.
See, if I was Mike Vrabel, I would stay the hell away from Seattle because you're going back to another situation with a middling quarterback
That's where he's good.
and no road to a good quarterback. Like
That's
to
what
me,
that's when he's at his best.
I don't think I don't think Vrabel is probably going to sign up for another job that does not have a path to a real quarterback. And whether that's somebody that's already in place or somebody that they can draft because they've got a high draft pick that year or whatever. And look, like Vrabel just got a contract extension this past off season, which was apparently a pretty highly paid contract extension. He can sit on his ass and collect checks from Amy Adams Strunk until he's ready to go take a coaching job. Maybe he wants to sit back and just wait and see what happens with some of these openings. I think he can afford to pick and choose. I don't think he has to go interview for every job. I mean, like clearly the guy made a lot of money in the NFL and he's already made a lot of money coaching the Titans as well. So like there's not going to be some huge well, I got, the mortgage is due. I got to go peddle my my wares out there or look at taking a defensive coordinator job or whatever. I think he'll sit back and pick his spot and who knows, maybe a year off um and getting further away from this whole ordeal in Tennessee will make him a more attractive candidate next cycle too. I don't know. I get the feeling that he's going to pick his spots and he's probably only going to interview like one or two places when he does decide to interview. So um to me, I still think he gets a head coaching job. I don't know whether it'll be this year or next year. If I was him, I wouldn't be in a huge rush to do anything though. I would not take a job just to take a job that did not have me set up for success.
Yeah, I mean, but like, what is that job, right? And when you look across all of these, all this, across the openings,
Yeah.
I don't know if there is that job.
I mean, Chargers would be one, I
But
think.
you have to go in with a GM that you may not agree with, right? We know we
Yeah.
saw how that worked out. You have aging pieces all over the offense. And then you have a defense that's, quite frankly, an underachieving defense made up of veterans that aren't that good and overpaid. That is still why, yes, you can cut people and restructure and all that kind of stuff, but you're kind of going into the same thing where everything else except for the quarterback is really bad. Like in my opinion, like I mean, it's some stuff's average and stuff like that, but
You
like
got
it's
to
not that great of a job, especially again with an owner that does not like spending.
I guess
I
like
mean, I don't know.
you've got a quarterback and you've got a left tackle, right? Like I mean
Yeah.
those cornerstones are in place. Which arguably were the two things that bit him the most in Tennessee. Um I mean I don't know that it's a perfect spot or whatever. I would say, well, Vegas doesn't really. I mean, Vegas doesn't have anything roster wise that you're excited about. Besides Devonte Adams, who's older, and a decent offensive line, and Max Crosby. That's it, right? Like, there's no other pieces in place there. But I guess the benefit is they're hiring a GM as well, right? So you could potentially shoehorn your Ryan Cowden in there if you wanted to look at that opening. And then the Panthers are in the same boat
Ryan
too,
Cowden.
right?
Lots of people lining up to interview Ryan Cowden, by the way.
And like I guess I wouldn't be totally floored if
Just
Vrabel
want to throw that out
found
there for everybody. Says, well, you don't know if Ryan Cowden's going to be a good GM or not. Well, we've seen.
yeah, I mean
I think we are getting the message.
he interviewed a lot before
Yeah.
and didn't get anything. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know that any of these were like blow me away kind of like spots. I mean, those spots really come over, but like if the Eagles came open, I still think the Eagles would be pretty attractive. If the Cowboys came open, I think that Cowboys would be super attractive, despite the fact, like,
I think they're
look,
attractive, but I don't know if Vrabel is going to find sustained success like everybody thinks.
I don't know.
That's kind of where I'm at.
I think if you plugged him in Dallas, and look, there's no guarantee. Like, just because he didn't get along with, Rand Carthon and didn't get along with Amy Adams Strong apparently that well,
Pretty
doesn't
much
mean he's
anybody.
gonna have these issues with every single owner or every single GM. Like, it just may just be that those people did not click.
Tigers don't change their stripes, Mike. I don't know if you've heard that old adage.
I
Tigers
have,
don't
but
change their stripe, but I can sure beat the shit out of a tiger. I think that's how the adage goes.
that's God. We're not going back down this road again.
Let's end with the Titans coaching comps. Have you seen my Titans coaching comps yet?
I did see those.
Okay. Well, just for those that have not seen the tweet, Brian Callahan, Mountain Man, Matt LaFleur. You like that comp? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's
a
good
little
one.
Rugged. I almost did Lumberjack Matt LaFleur, but he's very rugged.
Yeah.
Mike McDonald, defensive Sean McVay. I think we both agree on that one.
I agree. Yeah.
Ben Johnson, Muscle Beach, Kyle Shanahan. You like that one because he's a little bit more fit. And Kyle Shanahan's pretty fit, but he's
like,
a little bit more.
Is Ben Johnson like all?
He's not like Muscle Beach. He's not like that, but I think he's more fit than
he does. He does have a pretty good like jawline. Yeah. So
he's got a good demeanor, a physical demeanor.
Yeah.
Antonio Pierce, defensive Dan Campbell. Like I could see Antonio, like the stuff that Antonio Pierce says out in the like CEO head coach, but the stuff he says, like the Raider way and all that kind of stuff. I can see that.
He talks like in a he talks in like a real way, like Dan Campbell does.
Yeah. Bobby Slowick, low T, Mike McDaniel, so low testosterone for those people who don't know. You like that one? I thought that was pretty good.
That's a good one.
Aaron Glenn, non-terrorist, Sean McDermott, no terrorist affiliation right now.
Yeah, he hasn't given any speeches about Al Qaeda yet.
No 9/11 speeches. Dan Quinn, Kyle Shanahan, Merchant, Mike Vrabel, or Micah Parsons would have been a good one to throw out there. I like that one. Thomas Brown, bad situation, John Harbaugh, and I feel like because John Harbaugh kind of floats in between this world of like, oh, he's when it suits you, he's a special teams head coach. When it suits you, he's a defensive head coach. But I feel like above all else, he's a really good CEO head coach, and he's really good with his players and everything. And I think Thomas Brown is more like that than he is offensive or defense. I think Thomas Brown falls into the CEO head coach category myself.
Yeah, I would kind of skew that way.
Brian Johnson, cheesesteak Brian Schottenheimer. And I hate to say that about my boy Brian Johnson because I really liked Brian Johnson last year heading into the Titans offensive coordinator search. But Brian Johnson has a lot to prove before I give him a head coach. And Brian Schottenheimer is like that guy that just kind of floats around and is only as good as his head coach.
Shots fired.
That's what Brian Johnson is. And Mike Kafka, Nosferatu.
He has a some of those pictures floating around of him out there. I'd be like, can we get the scrub from the internet, please?
Yeah. I love the people that can't think for themselves because, I've seen one fanalist say that Aaron Glenn is older than Mike Vrabel, so he automatically sucks. And now everybody's in my mentions saying, well, he's an older version of Mike Vrabel. Okay, well, you're just echoing someone else. You think for your fucking self.
And who gives
and hopefully secondinbox.com will help you think for yourself. And he's like older by 3 years, by the way.
It's not like he's 70, right? Like, we're talking about a guy that's 49, 50, something like that.
Now, Mike, a couple of years ago, we were on Buck's show, the 615 sessions, I think, or the Buck Rises show, whatever it was called at the time. And I told everybody that don't worry, the deadline for the franchise tag is right near my birthday. And that deal's going to be done. Okay? That deal's going to get done. Don't worry. Then, turn around. I just want you to know that I looked at it this morning when I looked up Aaron Glenn's age. Because I was like, he can't be that much older than Mike Vrabel. Me and Aaron Glenn share the same birthday. So I'm throwing it out there right now.
Okay.
The Zach birthday is going to go 2-0. Aaron Glenn's going to be your Tennessee Titans head coach in 2024.
Okay. All right.
The Zach birthday theory is undefeated so far. So
it's true. You're like doubling down now, though. It'll be interesting to see if this pans out. If it pans out, then we're just going based off of your birthday for everything from now on.
There you go. You may have to. I mean, it's just how life works out sometimes. That will do it for us. Bluegrass Beverages, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Go out there, get your supplies while it lasts, while it's open, before the next quote unquote storm comes in. Make sure to go out there and get that. Mike's got a piece coming out, and so do we at Stacking the Inbox, where we both talk about lessons learned from Wild Card Weekend. Because apparently, while we may not be technically original thinkers, if we both thought the same thing, we did not discuss it. So we're obviously original thinkers compared to everybody else. So make
Some
sure
hive
you go
mind stuff
to
going on.
stackingtheinbox.com and Mike Herndon NFL. Don't avoid the herd mentality when it comes to your football coaches. Avoid that. Read at Second Inbox all your head coaching profiles and then decide for yourself. Do not just take someone else's word for it. Take objective analysis and then come up with your own decision. That's all I ask. When you talk about these head coaches, make sure to be well researched when you get out there and talk. I know that's hard for some of you, especially if you don't subscribe to stackingtheinbox.com, but it's well worth it. We got our Senior Bowl coverage, and I cannot wait to quit talking about head coaches. I'm so ready to talk about the Senior Bowl because this Senior Bowl roster is stacked. Me and Stoney will be down there and be bringing you articles and audio, video coverage every day. And we have a really, really good hit rate with our Senior Bowl prospects. Just wish Tennessee Titans would listen to us a little bit more. For Mike, I'm Zach. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.